So now we talk about Graha Maitram, which means planetary friendliness. And this is related to the lords of whatever planets we're talking about, let's just say the moon. So it's like if someone has their moon in Libra and the other one has their moon in Leo. Okay, you want to look and see the relationship of those lords. Now, they're mutually inimical with each other. So this is where you get planetary friendliness. Becomes very important. This is a really important consideration. This is why I assert this with my students all the time who go through my certification course and whatnot. The planetary friendship with each other, their natural friendship is very important. It's based on the houses that the other planets rule from each other's mula trikona. It's a hardwired relationship. And then the dignity is when you take that natural relationship and then you bring it into a birth chart or a, whatever the chart is, based on the proximity. But this is just the natural relationship between the planets. So Graha Maitram means planetary friendliness, as I said, and it shows the sort of natural affinity that people would have based on the sort of psychological temperament based on the Lord. So, like I say, the reason, and it's not arbitrary. Like I just used the example of Libra and Leo. The Sun and Venus don't share much in common, right? This is why. And of course it's hardwired into the zodiac scheme. Again, it's another reason why I use the South Indian chart. It's very easy to see it. Whereas, the house charts, who knows where where those signs line up at any given time. But you can see when planets, for instance, rule the same element, or, the air and the earth planets are friendly, the fire and water planets are basically friendly with each other, and then others have neutral relationships toward each other. So it's, like for instance, Saturn is unfriendly toward Jupiter, but Jupiter's neutral toward Saturn, and things like that. So it's not always two enemies. You get one is friendly toward one and neutral toward the other. And so there's a variation. When you get two planets that are mutually friendly toward each other, like let's say instead of being Libra-Leo, it's Libra-Capricorn. Well, Saturn and Venus are mutually friendly to each other. They're each a friend of the other. Venus-Mercury are friendly. Mercury-Saturn are friendly. But when you get, like I say, something like, like Jupiter-Mercury, one's friendly, the other one's not friendly, then you start getting these sort of mixed scores. So, and this gives 5 points. So again, we can just see, even with these first, 4 point-giving kutas, if they're all matching, then we have a high score. 8 points, 7 points, that's 15 right there. Then 6 points for Yoni, 5 points for Graha Maitram. So, again, if the lords are both friendly, then 5 points are given. If one is friendly and the other is neutral, because that's the other thing as well, as some are neutral toward the other. And again, these rules are sort of complex. The lords of 2, 12, 4, 5, and 8, 9 are friendly from another's mula trikona. All the other ones are unfriendly. And so, and the planets rule 2 houses, so if it rules a friendly and an unfriendly one, then it winds up being neutral. If it rules 2 friendly ones, then it's friendly. If it rules 2 unfriendly ones, then it's unfriendly. So you have the possibilities of each one, and then how each planet relates to the other as well. So if one is friendly and the other is neutral, then 4 points are given. If they're both neutral, then 3 points are given. If one is inimical and the other one is friendly, then 1 point is given. And if one is inimical and the other is neutral, then ½ a point is given. So again, it's kind of like, and if they're both inimical, then 0. And so when you see 0 Graha Maitram, like I said, that's like Venus and the Sun, then you have a 0 score. One of the things is that there's also another rule that if the Rashis are 7th house from each other, then the Graha Maitram is automatically present and a full 5 points are earned, which is interesting because that's an opposition, and usually opposites are either neutral to each other or it's sometimes inimical, like Saturn, Sun. But for Graha Maitram, 7th house earns a full score, which is Kind of weird, right? Mars, Venus are neutral toward each other, so that, you know, that would tend to give 3 points, you know. Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, Jupiter, one is unfriendly and one is neutral, so that should wind up being like 1 point, but again, because they're opposite, they would wind up being 5 points. So, again, this shows what I had already said before, that oppositions have a lot of magnetic attraction. And, you know, one of the reasons is because you're curious about that which is completely opposite of what you are. I mean, for God's sake, we're already curious, and I'm going to talk about heterosexual relationship. Again, the gay relationships, the roles are more fluid, but you usually see one partner that's more masculine, one that's more feminine. And at least when that sort of dynamic is somewhat present, it makes for an easier interaction. But those roles are more fluid, but especially in a, you know, in a male-female relationship, which is easier to learn from, you know, we're already naturally curious about our opposite in that regard, because a man and a woman they feel about as opposite as you can get at times. So when you bring in the opposite of the sign, it gives a strong magnetic attraction to want to figure that thing out. And oppositions can be very good when you can work through the dynamic. I think I said in an earlier video, sometimes oppositions create the most stress when there's a power imbalance. Meaning, if you're with your boss, or your mother, or your father, or someone that's not your equal, then the opposition is really difficult, because there's a boundary. Like, you can't just tell your boss to go to hell, right? I mean, you can, but you might get fired. Again, with the opposition, like if it's your friend, or even if it's your lover, it's a full relationship where there's no propriety or social norm, like with a mother and a father. You know, with parents, it's a very complicated role. It couldn't work with parents, but usually with parents, it's also, there's an authority thing that's a little bit uncomfortable. And, you know, duly so. We have a different relationship with our parents where we do just have a certain level of respect where we hesitate to encroach on that space. But with equals or siblings or friends or lovers, we can work out the dynamic, because the 7th house is going to bring us a lot of frustration at some point, because they're opposite. And we're going to be like pulled in a very opposite direction. And if something stops it, if there's like a, no, you can't say this, then it stops the flow. And you can even just look at those houses. Again, it's very simple. Like, the 4th house is related to the mother. That's in between the 1st and 7th house. 1st and 7th has this dynamic that wants to go here, but it has to go through all of this other stuff. 1st house to 4th house, which is how I feel. 7th house is you. 10th house is like our power struggle. And so if we can run this whole circuit, we can work out the 7th house opposition. But if somewhere it stops, like if you're my mother, then it's like, I get stuck in being totally honest with you, because you're my mother. You know, I don't want to tell you that you're a, you know, crazy lunatic or whatever, you know. Or if you're my boss, I have to stop because you have authority over me, and you might fire me or something. So 7th house works really well to keep people engaged when there's the potential to work through the whole, to go through the whole circle, because it's a circle, it's a circuit that we're really pulling something out of the other person, and we need to be able to complete the circuit. Otherwise, it's incredibly frustrating. Squares aren't nearly as frustrating. And this is why, again, as it said in the Bhavakuta and in Graha Maitram, that when there's an opposition, it's very favored. And it automatically gives the Graha Maitram. So Graha Maitram, what it really winds up showing now is that you just kind of see things differently. Because that's what the planets are. It's like when you got the Libra and the Leo. It's just a very different emotional style. And I know we just talked about the Rakshasa, Gana, and Manusha temperament. Again, it's a little different because Libra, Leo, let's say as an example, you know, Libra is very much about, it's not really temperament. It's it's kind of just like a style, you know. where, Libra is about just naturally, as an example, of just naturally wanting to accommodate, to be driven by, happiness, to be driven by desire. Now within there are different nakshatras that have different temperaments, so it's a different thing. Leo is driven by something totally different. Big things, purpose, and it's a very different approach to life. The Rashis are like our psychological approach to life. Big environment, like how we see things, working out. And it's related to elements and all that stuff, like, let's say the Capricorn, and the Leo. Okay, Capricorn's Earth, it's ruled by Saturn, it's like, Leo ruled by the Sun, inspired. Again, it's about, inner light and confidence, and Capricorn's about, hunkering down and being safe and being careful. Very different styles. So when you have Graha Maitram that's not matching or the points are low, it's like there's just a style, like you just don't have a lot in common. This is one of the things I usually say when the Graha Maitram is different. It's like, you're just very different people. Like, you just kind of go your way and you go your way. And again, you'll see people that they might have 20 points, but Graha Maitram is missing. And they'll talk about it. People focus on what's not there. And God, I've done thousands of readings for, 10, 12 years now. And, you'll see it's a good relationship. But it's like, well, but you don't have Graha Maitram, so it's like, I bet he's just, and then I'll look at the nature of his chart and see he's like, into nature and going out and taking walks, and you're sitting home with a book, right? That could very well be like a Leo-Virgo thing or something, right? And so, a Leo-Pisces maybe. Well, actually, those are friendly. But, so, maybe Leo-Taurus, right? And so, he's playing sports and you're, wanting to stay home and cook, or he wants to go to the symphony. Maybe he's, maybe he's Gemini, and she's Leo. She wants to go camping. Like, what? Like, we just have different ways of doing things. So you just say, just realize that that's part of it. You come together around the things that you do. Thank God you built this life together. Maybe they have they have the Bhavakuta matching, and the masculine feminine flow is good. At least he's there for you and he's supportive, and when things get upset, you don't blow things out of proportion because let's say that the Nadi Kuta is matching. But just realize, it's okay that he has his friends and you have your friends or whatever. So this is what you can tell the person. Again, if those things aren't matching and if it's really low and you see other things aren't there, like you don't have Graha Maitram, you don't have Gana, then you start getting trouble. If you got the Rakshasa woman, 0 Gana, and then like Graha Maitram is off, you're like fighting, you don't get along. You're like this crazy eccentric woman to him, and he wants, he's out there in the garden to get away from your like nutty behavior, right? It's not just like he's in the garden and you get along, right? So this is where you start to see these things pile up. This is how you take apart the thing that the people are actually living. So Graha Maitram in itself, you can certainly deal with it, but it's important. It shows people want to bond. People want to feel like they can share the opera with the other person. What winds up happening is one person's dragging the other one to do this thing, and then the other person's dragging the person to go camping. The other person doesn't want to go camping. They want to stay home and then maybe go out to the symphony. So they wind up saying, okay, well, I'll go to the symphony if you go camping. And they just like, they're just, while they're at the symphony, one of them's mad. When they're at the camping, the other one's mad. So Graha Maitram has that sort of quality. So tell them to take separate vacations, right? So it's that sort of thing. And it's 5 points. It can definitely add a lot. It's really good when it's there. But when it's not, the people can definitely feel, left out in the other one's life.